Hello again, ladies. It's already almost end of May, and we're halfway through the year. And we are about to have a very strong a full moon eclipse. And there's so many things that people are talking about right now, like, oh, there's an eclipse, it's full moon, it's blood moon, but really, what is it? Can you guys help us understand what is happening during a full moon eclipse? And you've also mentioned about an eclipse portal. Maybe, Thea, you can enlighten us what this means.
Sure. Um, so first off, I want to offer that we do have a space study on eclipses that Karina and I recorded, I think sometime last year.
Mhm.
And we really dove into what eclipses are. We talked about Gemini and Sagittarius, where the eclipses will continue to be until January of 2022. And then we also talked about briefly the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius last December because we're still in that energy. But basically, eclipses happen when something obstructs something else. So let me find some stuff. Maybe crystals will do. This is fun.
Classic Thea.
Let's pretend that this is the moon. This is the earth. I need one more hand. And this is the sun. So during a lunar eclipse, which is what we're going to have on Wednesday, it's the earth blocking the sun. So we see the earth's shadow. But what's happening on Wednesday, why it's super potent, because it's a supermoon. And supermoons happen when the moon is closest to the earth or in its perigee during her orbit. And this full moon on Wednesday is the closest or the biggest supermoon that we're going to have this year, because it's just 5 degrees from the nodes. So what are nodes? Nodes are just they're not planets, but they are points where the apparent path of the sun meet or intersect with the apparent path of the moon. And eclipses happen when full moons or new moons fall within 13 degrees of the nodes. And since and the nodes of fate now, we have the south node in Sagittarius and the north node in Gemini. The eclipse that will happen on Wednesday is a south node eclipse, meaning it's on the south node near the South Pole, and it's just 5 degrees off the node. It's just 5 degrees because it's happening in 5 degrees of Sagittarius. So it's a supermoon. It's a total lunar eclipse. It's total because it's like the sun is totally, or the earth is totally blocking the sun's light. So yeah. Yeah, so that's the astronomical explanation for eclipses. And I talked about the nodes briefly being in Gemini and Sagittarius. Yeah, I hope that answered your question for now.
I have a question. May I ask? So as you're talking about the nodes, I imagine that a lot of people our age, like me, are going through their reverse nodal return, which means that North Node in Sag, South Node in Gemini, which is the exact opposite of what's going on at this eclipse. So, how would you say to deal with that? Or how do we even understand like what we're supposed to be collectively releasing in the long run? That's actually what we're supposed to be going towards, right? Like if we have this North Node in Sag. So how do you work with something that you're meant to release, but also meant to get to?
That's a beautiful question, but maybe we can like take a step back and explain what nodes are. And like at least in astrology speak, why nodes are important. So there are a lot of branches of astrology in Vedic astrology and in Jyotish astrology. They believe that the north and south nodes are karmic points, where the south node is your karma So that's something that you're supposed to leave behind. And your north node is your dharma, where it's where you're supposed to be, like how your soul, why your soul is here and how it's incarnating in this lifetime to sort of correct and evolve towards. In Western astrology, we believe that we're really not supposed to leave our south node. I practice Western astrology, by the way. We're not really supposed to leave our south node because our south node is our comfort zone. It's how it's sort of where we attach our ego into, so that when we project ourselves out into the world, it's sort of within our south node story. Whereas with your north node, it's something that you're supposed to incorporate more in your life so that you can evolve as a human being. Because if you're just comfortable in your south node, then you're not really evolving, right? Because it's your opposite. Now, with your question, if it's a reverse nodal return, opposition, you can treat it sort of like an opposition, as an aspect in astrology where oppositions usually mirror something that's supposed to be yours to work out. And because you're being mirrored collectively, what the collective is supposed to evolve out of, the how it's projecting sometimes, because it's a mirror, how oppositions are treated is it can be some sort of blame game where it's everyone's fault but yours, or it's everyone mirroring something that's not yours. But in fact, what astrology teaches us is everything that's happening in the world without is but a reflection or a mirror of a world within. And so asking your question of, so how do we work with this, right? So like what, especially with the reverse nodal return, where a lot of things may not make sense because it's mirroring the opposite. So because it's an opposite, if it's an opposition, how do you treat an opposition? How do you work with an opposition in the chart, right? It's a polarity, but then it's holding tension. It's holding the tension between the opposites. You don't choose when you don't choose one side. You understand both sides, and then see how can you play out, like how can you give both Gemini and Sagittarius a voice. Because then if you're just tipping towards one side, where let's say you're favoring Gemini, and you know that your south node is in Gemini and the mirror around you is towards Gemini, then the call for you now is to tip that balance and be, okay, so how can I be more Sag and find my own truth in spite of all these truths and perspectives that are being presented to me? Did I help?
Yeah, that was a beautiful explanation. And actually, I think that's really, really, really helpful, because not only for people that are actually going through this reverse nodal axis, or anybody obviously in general that has nodes in their chart, which is everybody, but it's kind of just a reminder to come back to neutral ground, because that's what polarities are about, coming back to the middle and not choosing a side. And with it being Gemini season, with Mercury currently in Gemini and Venus currently in Gemini, and Gemini ruling the twins and dualities, there is so much of, well, how about this side? Well, how about this side? And then it's like a tipping of the scale, because nobody really knows where the middle is. And so we've gotten to a point where it's just everything's so confusing. And so coming back to like neutral ground is so key. So yeah, I think that's very helpful. Thank you.
So having the full moon and the eclipse together, I guess the eclipse only happens in a full moon, right?
And you
Can you guys explain like the energy of, because we hold our circles during new moons and full moons, but not necessarily during eclipse. So what are full moons? What are we supposed to be going through or doing during full moons? I know that in farming it's harvest season. But for us, what is it personally? And what is an eclipse also? Like, are we eclipsing something? Or like they say it also speeds up a lot of things for us, right? So combining the two, how do we harness that potential power or possibility during this day, and not just the the dark, scary side when there's an eclipse, and they say that all the monsters are gonna come out. But more on a positive note, yes, who wants to answer me in that?
Rina can talk about the monology, like what do we do on new
Yeah,
full moons, and then I can dive deeper on eclipses.
sure. Um, I'll go with what comes through and then I'll pass it over to you. So new moons are basically when the moon is, so new moons and full moons, as we always repeat, but it's always helpful to keep repeating because these things that we are meaning to get through, it takes a while for our heads to finally be like, okay, I get it. So if you're wondering why we repeat what we say a lot, it takes a little while for humans to finally comprehend and be like, okay, I get it. So new moons and full moons are a time where the veil is very thin between the worlds, so we have easier access into our subconscious and unconscious beliefs. We also have easier access into entities around us, which explains how this eclipse portal has opened, and a lot of us are feeling like really heavy or really worn down. We're feeling the fear, we're feeling the lower vibes. Maybe some of us that are extremely enlightened, which I would love to be one day, are feeling only the higher vibes of this eclipse portal. But the rest of us humans were kind of like, what the heck is going on? Um, and so this energy is generally around during new and full moons. But like you said, it's kind of like a super full moon almost in a sense, like an eclipse, because full moons, okay, new moons are for setting intentions because there is no moon in the sky. And then full moons are for revisiting your intentions and seeing what's there that you need to release to be able to finally complete the cycle that of the intentions that you've set in the new moon. So full moons are for releasing. Now, full moons combined with eclipses are like fast energy that comes in to help you speed up this release that you need to do. Now, if you're not accepting that you need to release things, for example, me trying to understand, okay, I know I need to release, but what do I need to release? What do I need to release? I'm so stuck on the question, what do I need to release? That the universe is showing me that I just need to get to releasing or just being open to release no matter whether or not I understand what I'm releasing, because that's what the energy of this time is. It's a gift to be able to release easier. Whether or not we know what we're releasing. I think that's at least my interpretation of it, because oftentimes our human minds are like, but I need to know what I'm releasing, but I need to know what I'm working with. But at the end of the day, I don't think we need to consciously know. If we subconsciously know, that's already something. And I say this because, for example, I do a lot of you girls know that I do Reiki, like I attend distance Reiki with Attune to the Moon, right? And I used to attend this like every Wednesday, and it would just be lay down and close your eyes and connect in the quantum. So you don't have music, you don't have any earphones, you're not really connecting to anybody. But you're laying down for 1 hour in silence, and then you wake up, or if you like fell asleep, which I usually just end up falling asleep, I wake up and I'm like, okay, I don't know if anything worked and I don't know if anything happened, but I do feel evidently lighter. I do feel like I'm able to go about my days easier. And so I didn't know what happened and what was released, but I had this energy sent to me, which allowed me to, and I was open to it. That's the key. Like whenever you're receiving Reiki, the key is to say, I am open to receive. And so kind of just being open to release, not knowing what's going to come out. Why did I even bring in that tangent? Oh, because I don't know that things are usually happening to me during these Reiki sessions when I'm sitting in it and when I'm confused and I'm like, is anything even happening? But the minute that I'm like, okay, something is happening, and then I go back and revisit, like for example, now I go back and revisit when I was doing all those Reikis 6 months ago. Times were so hard for me 6 months ago, but somehow this Reiki helped me deal with it. And I see that now that I'm not going through the Reiki, and I'm like, okay, now I see how that was helping me handle the times, if that makes any sense. How about you, Thea? You want to add stuff?
For me, probably just really echo what you said. New moons, we set a new intention because the slate is clean. The sun and the moon are close together. They're in a conjunction. So whatever the energy of the sun is also the energy of the moon. And when it hits the full moon, they're in an opposition. It's a time of culmination where we either end something. Astrologer Stormy Grace would always say this: we either end something, acknowledge something, or we make an adjustment, because it's the culmination, it's the peak, it's full light, it's fully illuminated. But with me, because you know that I really always like diving deep, full moons are such excellent time for shadow work. Because I mean, what do you do when you stand on the full moon? It's totally illuminated and you can play with your shadow. And what I want to bring up, I think I'm going ahead of myself, but I just want to bring up how there's so much talk in spiritual communities and ascension communities around being light workers and warriors of light. And we're talking about a Sagittarius eclipse, and Sagittarius is all about truth and all about higher learning and higher perspectives, right? The pursuit of the quintessential truth. And we're seeing how this eclipse in Sagittarius was activated in June, when we had the first eclipse in Sagittarius. That was the George Floyd racial system, racial discrimination and whatever. And America just went berserk with Black Lives Matter and what have you. And now towards this eclipse, we have Asian hate, and we have the war propagated by Israel. And I again want to bring up how, you know, we're sort of bypassing the dark and we're bypassing the shadow, because we're just focusing always on the light. But if we look at it from, let's say, cosmically, we're still propagating a sense of divide when we say we're warriors of light. So what are we fighting for? We're fighting dark, but then we're not going to appreciate light if there's no darkness. We're not going to appreciate the full moon if the sky is not dark. Yeah, I just want to say that. That's actually just all I want to add.
Can I add something? Sorry, I was just listening to something from my teacher, Jana Romer, yesterday, and she was like spitting these truths, and my brain was like, oh my God, yes, 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 everything, yes. And I wrote down two quotes, like what you just said, that really stood out to me. She said, the first thing is, a belief is a lie. There is no such thing as a belief that is actually true with a capital T, because it's a belief and we make it up. And this is Sagittarius. Sagittarius is about going towards the ultimate truth with a capital T. But Sagittarius is also getting lost in all these beliefs. And so that's part of the invitation, that's the things to be eclipsed out. Like, how can we stop having these beliefs that we're so focused on, and instead zoom out and do the Jupiter work and realize that there is such a big picture here. And the second one is, if you think the divide is bad now, if we don't start diversifying the information we're willing to take in, then the divide is only going to get worse. And that really, really blew my mind, because so much of the time we're just consuming what we feel like we need to hear, consuming what we are comfortable consuming. And it was amazing how she said, you know, she is the type of person who, when she hears somebody challenge her belief, or when she sees somebody with an opposite belief from her, instead of going the other side, she'll look at it and be like, oh, why? And actually like debunk it. And then maybe it will even change her perspective. And so that really inspires me and makes me realize that that's what all of us need to be doing right now. Because as soon as we hear a challenging, I know for myself, I've witnessed it a lot. As soon as I hear people that are on a challenging, on the side that's challenging my belief or what I think, immediately my head's like, and then I'm like, okay, I'm listening to you from my ears, but my heart's not listening. My mind's not listening. So how can we listen and have our hearts and minds open, even if it's such a hurt to our ego? Like, our egos get so hurt. And I think that's what's really being shown to us by the eclipse. Like, how can we just not transcend, but how can we understand the ego to instead give ourselves more space to go towards our heart? How about you, Princess? Sorry, we completely astrologized this.
That's fine. I'm just picking up some words as usual, and I put that into a big deal. Because as you're talking about like the ego, right? And not like listening with the heart and not being hurt or pushing for our beliefs. To me, I have little understanding of all the signs, but that's how I see Gemini and Sagittarius. Um, I know, well, I'm a Capricorn, right? But working with you guys, I've also known that each sign plays a different role in for each person. And my 12th house is in my Sagittarius is in my 12th house. So I don't really know exactly what that means. But to me, my personal relationship with Sagittarius is they're very, what like you mentioned, like very flighty, you know, like if what my parents, both my parents and even my stepdad and my sister are Sagittarius. And so I have this personal relationship with them. And this is probably why I grew up with a broken family, because they're like, well, if you guys don't, you know, want to understand, believe what I believe, then I'm just gonna go and leave you guys. Bye. And see coming, see the trauma from Sag. And also with Gemini, like even though they're communicators, and my Chiron is in Gemini, right, Thea? Even though we're Geminis are communicators, also they just want to believe or make you want to believe what they say. So this is what I'm picking up from what you said. So thank you for making us realize that, you know, like how can we really listen without being hurt? Because we're talking about full moons and eclipses, what are you guys? Can we move forward now? What are you guys releasing personally? This is really interesting because Karina mentioned like what am I releasing? What am I releasing? So as we go near to the full moon and the eclipse, have you found something out already? And if not, can you share some tips of like how you are dealing with it if they don't know what to release yet?
Okay. You want me to go first? Okay. So interesting that you were talking about the flightiness, because yes, 1000% that flightiness exists with Sag, and that same flightiness exists with Gemini. And the flightiness with Gemini, I feel like the flightiness with Sag is still okay, but the flightiness with Gemini just brings you such a mind overload that you just want to yell. um, but okay, what am I releasing? Honestly, I feel like I'm trying to release so many things and not know at the same time, but how am I going to figure out what I'm going to release? I'll go with that so that I can provide some tips. So I know that Sagittarius is in my third house. Yeah, Sagittarius is in my third house. And the third house is the house of communication, community, siblings, internet, anything else? Neighbors. Yeah. So this is where Sag is in my chart. This is where my North Node also is in my chart. And so that's why I asked Thea the question of like, how do you work with a reverse nodal return? Because how do I know what I meant to release if that's where my North Node is? But I think a lot of what I'm trying to release, given that it's in my third house, is just this self-righteousness when I'm in communication with people. It's understanding that, sure, I do have my beliefs, and I have created these beliefs based on my trauma, based on what I've gone through in my life. And so these beliefs may be true right now, and I may be paying attention to people that only have the same beliefs, but beliefs are ever changing. Like I shared, like what Jana said, like every belief is a lie. And so and maybe I won't go so far to say it's a lie, but it's a story that we tell ourselves. And so at the end of the day, for me, I think what I'm releasing, like I just said, is self-righteousness and opening up to listen to different perspectives without having my defenses come up, because I'm a very, very reactive person. I'm a very reactive and very defensive person. And Obviously I'm going to bring in astrology because this whole thing is about astrology, but I have a Leo sun and a Taurus moon, and both of those are fixed signs, and fixed signs are very stubborn and very set in what they want. And I see it so much in my personality that like when I make a decision, I'm like, no, it's this way. And I have such resistance to change it, even when I know that it should change. Maybe I mean, yes, I do make an effort to change it, but it's hard. Like it takes a lot to get that change. So for me, it's about being more adaptable, and it's about understanding that my beliefs, yes, I have them, but they're built on trauma. They're built on stuff that have allowed me to stay safe with my Taurus moon. Like staying safe has been so important for me. And so I want to open up to being more challenged and seeing how can I keep my heart open when the whole world is telling us like to toughen up. But since I brought in my third house, I think it's important to also bring in my ninth house, which is the polarity. So I have South Node in my North. See, this is where I get confused. The current South Node in my third house and the current North Node in my ninth house. And the ninth house is the house of bigger philosophies and bigger beliefs. And so, how can I let go of my current beliefs to understand beliefs that are more sustainable for the entire human brain? Does that make sense? Like the human brain at large, instead of my personal human brain, like how can I look at things in a perspective that's only good for my own brain, but instead for everybody? And I realize that that's not going to be easy to create. And basically, I guess what I'm just trying to move away from is beliefs on the whole, because having beliefs just seems to be pretty complicated. Creating new beliefs also seems to be pretty complicated because we don't know what on earth is real. I've been talking to Navs and telling him how like so much is going to change. And this is going to be taking it on a whole different tangent. So I'm not going to go in there right now, but just a little glimpse of it is that a lot of people having their Saturn returns in Aquarius right now are going to be changing the world. And that's what's going on right now. We'll go into it later, but that's what I'm eclipsing out. How about you guys?
I can go last, princess.
You're boiling, brewing. Sorry. That's funny because as I was listening to Karina sharing, I didn't really know because I thought, well, personally, I've been really like caught up with my other work, which is selling cacao, and I'm like, that's what I'm thinking every day, right? Like, how am I going to release, everything that I've been making for the past like 2 years, well, specifically last year also. And in my head, I'm battling with like, does it always have to be a negative release? Could it be like positive release also? Like we release something, right? So we can make space for the new. And in my head, it was okay, so let's just release everything that we made already so they can sell. And then we can move forward to the next things that we are going to create. So I thought that that's all I'm going to release. And I've been really optimistic recently because I'm like, even I invited you guys to do like a fire puja and mantra for Lakshmi, for abundance and everything. But right now what I'm realizing is that my like north node is in Aries and my south is in Libra. And I've always been scared to go on my own, and I'm like, what is this north node like, like talking about, and why is it in Aries? I don't want to be alone. I really love being with people. Libra, right? But I guess to me it's I'm realizing now that it doesn't mean that I should be alone or I work well alone, because I don't. But it's more of like owning up to like my self-worth, like finding my worth and really putting myself out there and like my offerings, right? Like I've worked on many things with you guys, and even with this, we were like, okay, how do we charge? Are we even charging? Is this a service? But we are already doing is of the service, right? It's more of like, how do we value our time and ourselves, and how do we collect, what I guess full moon is reaping what you sow also. So that's harvesting. So it's really in theme. So yeah, my word is self-worth, I guess. Yeah, and to stop resisting, because I think the whole year since we started with like going into, isolation or being restricted and all that, we have been resisting so much, and I think we've played too much of a victim already. Like, I want to do this, I want to do that, and then we are the recipe pa of the people living with us, with their different signs and personalities. So it's like, why am I here? So what I'm learning recently is to at least lower down the volume of resistance, because it's what was really difficult to deal with the past. How long have we been in lockdown? A year and a half? Forever.
Like a year and 2 months.
Yeah. So yeah. So self-worth and um, res- to stop resisting. Yeah.
Okay. So definitely I'm going to share what I'm going to release, and then I'll probably dive a little more into eclipses and eclipse families, just to guide everyone, if you're reflecting and you don't really know how to release. And of course, not everyone knows their natal chart, and we were already talking about which houses or areas of life the eclipse is actually activating in our own lives. But yeah, so what am I releasing? I'm just going to share a little bit of astrology, my personal astrology. We did mention that this eclipse is happening in 5 degrees of Sagittarius. I have 1, 2, 3. I have a lot of planets in Sagittarius. And I also have Sagittarius in my 12th house. And 12th house, it's the house of the unseen. It's the house of, being one with the mystical world. It's also the house of Pisces, or the house of Jupiter. But anyway, I have my sun at 3 degrees. So this eclipse is activating my sun, and the sun in astrology is your identity. I also have my Uranus. So Uranus is actually how you innovate, well, for me, being in Sagittarius and being an innovator in my Mars in Aquarius, I like to rebel because I like to innovate. I like building the counterculture just for the sake of countering the culture, if that even makes sense, if that's even healthy. Not all the time it's healthy, and I'm learning that. I'm learning how to comply. So I am releasing this perpetual need to counter the culture. Although I freaking want to break the matrix still. I know you're listening to me. I also have my Chiron, like Princess, I have my Chiron in Gemini at 6 degrees, which is where the sun is. So the sun is activating my Chiron, and this is exactly what we're talking about. But my Chiron in the 6th house is about my routines, how I communicate about what I need on the daily basis. Just because I have a lot of mutability in my chart, I need to be able to have that freedom to actually really listen to what my body wants right now, and be safe to change my mind, because I can change my mind like this. And I have a triple conjunction of Sun, Venus, and Jupiter in Capricorn, so I can wear my heart on my sleeve. So like Karina, when I feel something, I feel it to the 10,000th degree, and I can't hide it. If I'm hungry, you can see it in my face. If I'm angry, you can see it in my face. If I'm sad, you can see it in my whole body. But anyway, I'm releasing a lot, because it's hitting so much of these personal planets in me. And so I'm releasing my sense of identity in a way, because this is my second nodal return. And I just want to talk about briefly how eclipses come in families. We share in the circles that moon, like the full moon and the new moon, they're not in isolation. I mean, we know that nothing in life is isolated. Everything is interconnected. We are in this big interconnection of like a bigger web of life. So do full moons and new moons. So moon families come in like 24 months. So if, as a guide, with this particular eclipse, because eclipses come in families called Saros cycles. So they're these bigger cycles that come every 18 years. And then there's a metonic cycle that completes every 19 years. If that's too complicated, just remember what you were doing in 2003, or what was coming up for you, what came up for you in 2003 that is reaching some sense of culmination this year. That's a big family. So the Saros family of this particular eclipse is in Saros 121. And also, these eclipses happen in the same geographical location every 54 years. So the fact that this eclipse is visible in this area adds to it at a mundane level, meaning because we can see it, we can feel it, like how we're feeling the effects of this eclipse is bigger in the Philippines and in Southeast Asia. The solar eclipse that's going to happen on June 11, we are not going to see it. It's like more of like the northern hemisphere is going to see it, but it doesn't mean that we're not affected the same way. It just means that we're affected the same way, or it's not that strong for us who like in this geographical location. So what was happening in the Philippines in 2003 and what's happening in the Philippines now, what was happening in your life back in 2003, and that is sort of reaching its culmination now, that you're needing to adjust, you're needing to end something, or you're just really needing to acknowledge something so you can change it. We talked about how eclipses are portals. They're portals because they're hitting karmic points. And we talked about the nodes. The nodes are karmic points. And they can like really like shoot you to that direction should you be willing and open to the invitation of the themes of the eclipse. And since it's a south node eclipse, it's more of a releasing of something, more than an acknowledging or receiving something. If it's a north node eclipse, it's more of what should we work more towards receiving. But if it's a south node eclipse, what should we work more towards releasing? There's a difference if it's a south node eclipse or if it's a north node eclipse. And with south node in Sagittarius, we talked about it already, like being over critical, pushing agenda. How can we? Is it me?
Your voice is like elongating in words that it needs to be elongated in, so that's beautiful.
So how can we be less critical or less judgmental and be more like Gemini, where we're just really open to the many possible perspectives that the world has to offer us? Karina quoted Jana when she said that truths are lies, and we're realizing more of that as Jupiter travels Pisces, at least just the first 2 degrees, where we're realizing that truth can be subjective, because truth then is just perception, right? And everyone can have truth. But the basic, and this is where I want to bring in Saturn retrograde, because Saturn is station retrograde today as we record this in Aquarius. And Saturn is all about our structures. It's the planet of construction. It's our taskmaster. Am I breaking again?
Yeah, your face is stuck.
Saturn is what?
Saturn doesn't want you to say what Saturn's about.
Oh, Saturn does that all the time. But anyway, Saturn is our reality bubble. Or like Saturn is this big brother telling you, like literally big brother in Aquarius, where he's watching all of us. And he's imposing all of these rules and all of these conditions and all of these structures. But then sort of, he's also this I keep seeing a hat. Like wear this hat and see that this is the reality that we've built ourselves. Like this is what the reality that our collective has built. But with Neptune, I want to bring up Neptune in Pisces and Jupiter in Pisces, because the ruler of this supermoon, blood moon, total lunar eclipse is Jupiter. And Jupiter is in a mutual domicile with Neptune in Pisces that hasn't happened since 1856. And what I want to bring up here is Neptune can be the planet of fantasy and Saturn the planet of reality. But with Jupiter and Neptune together, it's like this reality bubble just dissolves. And we're slowly figuring out how, maybe Neptune and Jupiter is the reality and Saturn is the fantasy, making us believe that the reality that we're living in right now is the real reality. Because we know that a lot of the schisms and the systems need changing. We keep talking about this in our circles. This is why we're here. This is why we're doing what we're doing, so that we can give you guys different perspectives and, ideally sort of wake you up to the truth that you can have your own truth. In spite of what your system and your culture and your family tell you, you can be your own person in spite of your religion. And at the end of the day, all of these isms propagate the divide more than love and compassion, which is what we're really about at the end of the day.
I like that.
Beautiful. Okay, so we are 2 days away from the gate, from the portal. Do you guys have like a personal belief, maybe from childhood, or like has it changed now, knowing what you know already about like full moon eclipses? And is there any like ritual that you do or personal practice that you do or you're going to do? I know we're gonna spend the full moon, we're gonna observe together, but like personally, is there any beliefs or practice that you have, and something that you advise not to do also? Just because I'm into rituals and ceremonies, so it's a little bit of a selfish question.
Okay, so I'll start. I have a little bit to add about Saturn retrograde. And so I love how you go into the depths and like completely jump in, and it's like, okay, we're here. So let's bring it up a little bit more surface level for anybody that doesn't really understand Saturn retrograde, or Neptune, just because as you were speaking, your voice was like getting choppy. I feel like that's Saturn, Neptune, and Mercury coming to play because they don't want us to hear what's going on. But I'll just do a little bit of a recap of, so Saturn, like Thea said, is discipline, it's structures, it's the way we are taught reality is. In Aquarius, so I was saying earlier, I've been telling Nevs that this is the rise of the people with Saturn in Aquarius. So basically what I was telling him was that within the next 4 or 5 years, our world is going to drastically change. What we know is real, what we know how things work, everything that we know, it's going to be different. Because everybody with their Saturn in Aquarius, I mean, everybody in general, and especially while Saturn is in Aquarius right now, but especially everybody with their Saturn in Aquarius are having this Saturn of theirs activated. And so we're sitting in a place that doesn't fit for us. If we're practicing beliefs, if we have systems and structures in order that don't work, that haven't worked, we're breaking it right now. This is why this Saturn return for me personally, because I'm going through my Saturn return, is so freaking heavy. It's because we've been fed all these things, and Aquarius is a sign that will just like Saturn ruling Capricorn will stick to the structures that we've built. Saturn ruling Aquarius will break the structures that don't work and create new structures. That's hella hard, you guys. That's what we're sitting in right now. We're sitting in looking at the structures that we've built and disrupting them, or like changing them for them to be new structures. And somehow, of course, there is a side of all of us that just wishes that this could be done overnight. It's like, okay, this is what's wrong, and so let's fix it. But this is years and years of work that it took to even create this system and structure. So how do we think that it's going to be overnight that we're like, okay, this doesn't work, let's change it? And so I think we're really, really being called to, number one, look in at what our own work is. Like, what is our Saturn work? And if you don't know what Saturn work even is, it's where do you feel like you don't have systems and structures, or where do you feel like the systems and structures in your life are too rigid? And how can you create a new system? I mean, for so long, like we've been told, this is how you make money. This is how you live your life. This is how, like, you have to go into an office and this is the only way to make the most money. Cryptocurrency is coming up. NBA Top Shot, which like Navs is really into right now. Wow, the amount of money that's being rolled there. It has just come out this past year, and it's the #1 cryptocurrency trading platform right now. Basically, these are all just little ways to show us that the reality that we've learned exists. As Thea said, it could very likely be the fantasy that exists, and the reality could be what we think is fantasy. So there has been such a freaking huge play on words, and I think this comes back to Gemini as well. There has been such a huge play on words and the way words are used, the way we care, like the weight words carry, and perceptions that go behind the words that we use, that it's all just gotten so confusing. And I think the reason we're getting so confused is we think we need to be a certain way. We think we need to adhere to certain structures. But when you go to look at it, that's what Saturn in Aquarius is saying. The systems and structures that used to work no longer work. So if we're trying to adhere to those systems, we're setting ourselves up for failure. And so it's kind of, how can we then tune into this Jupiter in Pisces, which is really, really freaking watery. And like, in my opinion, that's what's been like the really strong water this last week, with all these emotions coming up and all these things coming up, because like you said, Neptune is like Pisces energy. That's sometimes illusion, that's fantasy, that's the dream world. But what if the work is really to bring our dream world into this reality? That's likely what it is, because what Jupiter does is expand anything it touches. Jupiter has gone into Pisces. Pisces is the sign of the dreamer. It's expanding it. And so we're like, shit, we're living in this dream world. It's not conducive. It's da-da-da-da-da. We're all this negative self-talk because we actually want this. We are here. We're telling ourselves we can't have this because we're not worthy of having this, and this is not how life works. And so we're stuck here. We can't go back here. We want to go here, but we're here because we're humans, and our brain is just like, no, we're told to go this way. So how can we go this way? Sorry, that was my rant. I feel like my whole like last week came down to this one like paragraph. Now to go into answering your question about rituals. So growing up Hindu, it's so funny because it's every time there was an eclipse coming up, my mom would tell, so I'm much, much younger than my sibling. So my mom would tell my sister, for example, when she was pregnant, you're not allowed to move around during the exact time of an eclipse. You're not allowed to hold a pen during the time of an eclipse, because if you're pregnant and you're holding a pen, the baby that comes out will have an ink stain. So kind of like wild superstitions like this, and a lot of superstitions like this still exist in India, and I think also some beliefs in the Philippines that are like, don't look at the sun, don't look at the moon, it's like bad luck. And so a lot of the beliefs around full moons and full moon eclipses rather, and new moon eclipses as well, are to not do rituals. They're to not do rituals, not make any intentions, not really do much, just because we're trying to eclipse out so much. And in my own mind, the way this makes sense is we're already doing all the work to try to eclipse. So why divide our attention into even trying to do a ritual? I don't know what Thea, maybe you know the real meaning behind why we're not supposed to do rituals, if that's not the real meaning. But so I don't know what I'm going to do as a ritual. Obviously, praying can never be bad. So getting together to meditate I don't think that's a problem. But yeah, when you ask rituals, I don't really know what I'm gonna do other than hang out with you guys and watch the eclipse and kind of just allow that to be the ritual, allow being present to be the ritual, or allow being neutral to be the ritual, because in the past week there have been so many like downs and ups and ups and downs, and it's like the scale that can never. And with my Libra rising, I freaking need the scale to be balanced. So I think I'm just going to be present, try to be neutral, and that will be my ritual. Sorry for my very long answer.
Oh, it's very beautiful and perfect. But since I know most of our communities love crystals, I mean, obviously the three of us do, don't charge your crystals during an eclipse. Charge it on a regular full moon, but don't charge it during an eclipse, just because, like we said, eclipses are portals of change. I talked about briefly how eclipses come in families. So that's why it's called a portal, because it's a window that catapults you towards your dharma or towards your north node. Doesn't necessarily have to be the collective north node, but it's really more of like a karmic point and a karmic correction. And so if you charge your crystal, that's something during during a time when it's so unstable, the energies that your crystal will carry will be the same. So that's one, I think that's a very big tip that we can share, because it's also a practical tip. Definitely meditate and presence and witnessing. Like in the Philippines, we have the tale of the Bakunawa swallowing the seven moons, right? So that's why we're like, I think this also encompasses in a lot of traditions and cultures where during the eclipse, don't go out, don't do a lot of things, because the call is don't go out, go in. Because I mean, that's the invitation, right? Go back 18 years ago. If you are even alive 18 years ago, what was happening to you? 36 years ago, if you're alive that long, what was happening to you 36 years ago while I was in my mother's belly? Like these things, and really witness what's coming up for you, because it's shadow play and shadow time. It's a time, especially during lunar eclipses, where we can watch it with our eyes and witness the magic with our senses. We're gonna see the moon turn red, but that's just really the sun, and that's just really the earth blocking the moon. And so we're seeing all of the shadows that are collective or of the earth that's being reflected from the moon. And the moon represents our feelings, our emotions, our home, how we feel secure, how we feel nourished. But the earth, our being, our physical manifestation during this lifetime is blocking that. And it's blocking it so that we can see what's supposed to be eclipsed out, or what's supposed to be improved, acknowledged, ended, or adjusted in our own lives. And so I hope that can be a ritual. And in terms of reflection points, definitely Sagittarius points of where are you being self-righteous and where you're being overly judgmental. I want to bring up again the energies that it brought up on a collective scale last June of 2020, and how we had 6 eclipses in 2020. And so if there's anything, obviously a lot of things happened in 2020. And with everything that Karina said about, Saturn in Aquarius going retrograde until October, we talked about Pluto going retrograde the last full moon in Scorpio. And Pluto is still in Capricorn until 2024. So that's why add that to the equation, why Karina said 4 or 5 years from now, the world as we know it won't be the same. Because Pluto in Capricorn until 2024 is just really the destruction and reconstruction of everything that we know, like all the structures that we know to be true. Uranus in Taurus. Taurus is also physical structure, earth, money, resources. Uranus will be in Taurus until 2026. Like, did I get that reverse? Pluto in Capricorn until 2024, Uranus in Taurus until 2026.
I can't remember. But basically, in the grand scheme of things, by 2025, I think we'll see pretty significant changes
and adjustments. So presence, definitely being present, and just self-compassion, like what Princess shared, just releasing everything that's not making her feel more worthy. And that can never be, I don't think we can ever have enough of that. Just, cultivating compassion and cultivating inner authority, especially now. What is your own truth? And our prayer, really, well, my personal prayer for this eclipse is that may we come back to the truth that we are love. That sounds so cheesy, and it's so difficult to practice that every day. So I really hope and pray that for everyone, that we remember that we are that essence, love as a being, not just a feeling or an emotion, but as a being. What would it mean when we're being love? I'm getting
It's beautiful. How about you, Princess? Your ritual plan.
2025, that's a bit of how many months, moons? So I think I shared with you the other day, Karina. I said slow and steady wins the race because I was watching a video of someone talking about astrology, and that's what she said, like slow and steady wins the race because like Sagittarius is fire, right? And it's a fire that we can't catch, like I mentioned earlier. It's very flighty. And then here comes Gemini, who's very mental, blah 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 blah. And when you mix the two, they're kind of like ah and like you mentioned yesterday, like system circuit breakdown. And that's why I wanted to see you guys on Wednesday, because I just want to have like that, space with you guys to just breathe and like to come back to our essence of being, like Thea mentioned, love and holding space for each other. Because I think, yes, we are learning a lot with like all the knowledge and information that we're getting from the internet, but also I feel like we are needing that sense of like, community touch, feeling like togetherness, and just being together, breathing together. um yeah, it's and I think that's also a release, right? Knowing that you're being held by other people who shares the same like passion with you. And that's what I encourage for people to do if they can't be physically together with their loved ones. Maybe like have a phone call with them, and share their small wins with their family. And there's so many fears coming up at the moment, like there's like we're in the middle of the year, we're not seeing results, especially if you have like your own small business or your own little project that you're doing, and nothing's moving, right? And how do we fight fear? It's just trusting that the universe will provide, like you guys mentioned. Things are changing and it's not easy and it won't be easy. So yeah, also I think I will do a few like just a lot of body relaxations and like breathing, because that's how you counter the mind, right? The mind will always go somewhere and will always tell you, like, to be honest, I see my phone and I'm like, I don't know where I am really. And so recently I've been practicing like just what do you call this, moving the eyes, like there's like a name for that in yoga, but like when you just blink your eyes and then you move like sideways the other side and you roll it, it's basically just to like reset your eyes, because like they say, the eyes are the window to the soul. And I'm just getting that now, that it is really the window to your soul when you watch something and it brings you there and you're not present anymore. And it's like, okay, this is a recipe from Food Network. Okay, this is the the fashion now that I want. And it does create something. It takes you to a journey but it's like going back to the reality and the truth. It's like, what is the truth and what is reality? But in my mind, it's feeding me to be there, you know. It's like, okay, this is what I'm shopping now, but did I really buy it? No. So ang daming nangyayari, 'di ba? So going back to the breath, and maybe we can do a big breath now together. So just breathing in really full through the nose, belly expanding, and then exhale. Ah, breathing in and out, release. One more time together, breathing in and out, release. Mm. You're safe, you're loved. But my body's shaking a lot. I think with so much information, I'm like hyperventilating. Sometimes my breath is like right here, like ah. So yeah, it will be fun on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want to add?
I have a quick, sorry. I have a quick Gemini Sag thing to add. And I want to add that Gemini and Sag are both mutable signs. And mutable signs are adaptable signs, which means what we give them is what they will spin out of control, kind of, in a way, because they're adaptable. It's easy for them to absorb what's around them. And so that's why we're kind of feeling like this. Like we're like Gemini and Sag energy are picking up on this already Gemini energy because of the sun and Venus and Mercury about to go retrograde in Gemini, that even more we're kind of like trying to do a lot of things. And it's so funny that you said you're shopping, but are you even buying? Like I went on Zalora so many times, like picked stuff. Have I checked out of my cart? No. Like, and it's funny
You feel like you shopped, right?
exactly. But then also part of it is like setting myself up for failure because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have all these new things, and then I don't check out. I'm like, what the heck was the point of that? But okay, so I wanted to bring up that they're mutable signs, and I also want to bring up just staying true to myself, to have fun, because Sag is such a freaking fun sign. We're talking about Sag's low sides, which of course we have to honor because it's a time to release, but Sag has such beauty. And full moons, yes, it's a full moon eclipse where we're meant to release, but full moons are times of celebration. And a full moon in Sag calls for celebration. And Sag is so optimistic because Sag is ruled by Jupiter. And maybe we're not seeing that much of that because Jupiter is in Pisces, which is so emotional.
They're the sun.
What?
Sun or Jupiter. Sun squaring Jupiter.
Oh, and the sun is squaring Jupiter. So it feels like there's not that much brightness. No, but sun squaring Jupiter also just makes it bigger. It just makes everything bigger. So I want to return to like focus on fun. Focus on what allows you to have fun with being alive, because we can play with shadows. We will play with shadows whether or not we want to. But it's so important to have that anchor, like Thea said too, in love and in fun, because at the end of the day, we're alive to be alive. We're on this earth to enjoy being on this earth. It is us who chose to go through this path and make it a little bit more difficult. Well, with good reason, because we want to be prepared when everyone else is going through this massive change within themselves. That way we can guide. But we're also human and we're also earthlings, and we're also here to kind of have fun and enjoy the ride. So yeah, that's my invitation. Kind of attune not only to the lower sides, or don't only release the lower sides, but attune to the higher sides so that you have hope, so that you have something that you're working towards. Because without that, we're like, again, like I said earlier, headless chickens going around everywhere, not knowing what we're doing and where we're going and why we're even going. So Princess, where are we going? Sorry, Thea, go on.
No, I just want to bring up like just two transits there I think will be big as part of, you know, the bigger eclipse. We have Mercury squaring Neptune. Am I right?
Is that today?
We had
No, Friday, is it?
this week.
Oh, I don't
Tomorrow. We have Mercury squaring Neptune, and that's your lower mind and your higher mind. It's your logic and your intuition. At the end of the day, can you trust your intuition enough? Because Pallas is conjunct Neptune, as Pallas is really all about this feminine intuition or the divine feminine power. So can we trust that? Can we trust that our emotions will guide us? And ideally, we align that emotion with fun and happiness and higher vibration, not to bypass the shadow. I mean, we talked about a lot of shadow, but just really align it with love and really align it with fun. And really trust that intuition more than what our logic dictates, because obviously there's a lot that our logic dictates that don't make sense in a way that sense really truly is aligning to love. If that is making sense right now. And then Venus is also going to square Neptune. And I mean,
Friday.
Yeah, on Friday, probably just a sense of caution to, yes, incorporate fun, but also at the same time, just notice where you're being overboard and where a bit of logic can make sense when sense is making sense. Yeah, I just want to end with that.
Ooh, do you want to end, or do you want to say a little bit about Mercury, about the station retrograde too? I think we'll have more space and time to say that, but do you want to give like 3 sentences about it?
I feel like this Mercury and Gemini is an invitation for us to really contribute to what is going on with how we communicate and how we socialize. Yes, definitely slow and steady wins the race. Retrograde snafus only happen when we're going around like headless chicken and we don't know when we're prioritizing speed over direction. But this is why we're doing the circles, right? And we keep espousing, build your inner authority, build that inner stability, your inner sanctum, understand what you're here for, what your purpose is, because then you have that direction and you have those rudders to go towards. Because this Mercury and Gemini is just, it's playing out in a softer harmonic versus everything that we talked about: Saturn going retrograde, Jupiter about to go retrograde in June, the eclipses that are happening, Pluto still in Capricorn. Like, these are collective things that are shaking up the earth, literally and figuratively. And Mercury and Gemini is asking us to participate. It's what I want to say. That's more than 3 sentences. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That made a lot of sense. All right. That was a lot of juice.
I have a last question, Deba. Since we already went through like what are we releasing and more of like, the things that we don't align with anymore. But so on a lighter note, what are you like proclaiming? Like I think this is in line to what they said, like contribution, right? So if we are to contribute to this, like what are you proclaiming to the world, like, especially with your own like gifts or offering? Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, you go first.
Um,
My is
I was gonna say, I am proclaiming that Mata is launching soon. But we're launching it the beta launch is on June 12th. So independence. So emancipation from the schisms of the system. Just kidding. But yeah, that's really the biggest contribution. And I did share that this is my second. So you know how old I am already. The third time that I'm profecting my 12th house. So I'm back to my first house and re-identifying my identity. I am not my job. I am not my profession. I am not my past life, but this is me now. And I am blending astrology with psychology and finding that intersection between ecology and holistic, what do we call this? As esoteric modalities to really bring to the surface how our disassociation from nature is actually causing all this degradation in our culture and in our environment, and how we can actually bring that together through just individuating, and then how that can be our bridge towards, you know, bigger systemic change and a better world. So this is why we're doing the work, and that's my big proclamation for this season, this eclipse portal.
Okay, Princess, you go next. I don't know what I'm proclaiming yet.
Already in your IG, no? You love, no, your love language in based on your astrology. Anyway, and that's not for me to say. What am I proclaiming? So I'm proclaiming that I am, my God, just kidding, goddess, no. What? Well, I mentioned earlier self-worth. So, Maya cacao is now like slowly and steadily growing. We have um, onboarded like two people helping us with behind the scene, and I recently spoke to our farmers in Davao de Oro, and they're excited because we want to go to like retail, but that's not under Maya, that's under their name, like they're called Cacao and Beyond. So hopefully we'll find places for them to grow. What else? The 11th of the month, we are deeply madly, going for this already, because we have some people asking us on Instagram for Maya, like if we hold like regular ceremonies, and this is where I'm like we are directing them to, so they can also learn not just like their ritual, the cacao ritual, but also like how to work with the astrological theme. And yeah, that's it. Like I thought that it was too weird to be doing this and to be like labeled as spiritual or woo woo, but on the other side, I'm realizing that you don't have to be spiritual to drink cacao, right? Or to listen to where you're going. Like we're like you asked, where are we going? So and this is it. We're kind of like we're lucky to have a compass, and it's for sure it's not for everyone, but if they want to know more, I'm understanding so much, and you guys are too, right, basing on what we spoke about just today. So yeah, you don't need to be spiritual to know where you're going. Really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I love that. You don't need to be spiritual to know where you're going. And you know what? People who say they're not spiritual, like you have a spirit. So at the end of the day, you're somehow spiritual. You like a spirit is involved in your system. So to some degree, you are spiritual. Okay, what am I proclaiming? So one is showing up as I am, because that's part of the resistance that I faced in this past week, which was I'm sharing with people how to go about things. I'm sharing with people what I think would help us, because this is what I'm receiving. But somehow I finally like got through this whole imposter syndrome situation. I'm like, I'm way past that. That's gone, da da da. But then now here I am again being like, I'm giving advice to people, or I'm telling people what could help them, but I'm also still working through it. I'm not perfect. I'm not a fairy. I am at the same level trying to figure out all the same things. And so I said showing up as I am, because the messages that I share, for example, here in our moon circles on Starry Vibes, these are messages that I receive as channeled teachings from my highest self, from guides, from loving agents that want to come through. And so I think it's important to say that we're not showing up because we're perfect. We're showing up because we know that there are more people that need to do this kind of work, and that need to hear that they're supported and guided, because we are. And in showing up, we create this community of people that are conscious and that want to work on themselves and support other people as they work on themselves. So that's my first. I'm going to show up no matter who I am, whether people think I'm an imposter or not. I'm here being me, however you may take me, because of course everybody has their own perceptions. And then my second one is my offers are open. And this has been a long time coming because last year I was like, can I even create offers? Can I even charge for my energy? And now here I am charging for my energy. I've done two readings in the past week. It was so much fun. I feel so fulfilled. And I know that like that's not a lot of readings, but that's way more than I've ever had in like 1 week. And yeah, so I have lots of different offers of readings. I have the Astro Love Language, like you were talking about, but not even only that anymore. I have understanding your whole chart. It's called Carousel, and it's basically understanding all the houses in your chart. And so if you were listening through our conversation and you have no idea which house what is in, I can help you with that. Yeah, so I have a personal planets reading, I have a carousel reading, I have a love language reading, I have a relationship reading. So I just have readings for the world to kind of help you not be a chickenless, I mean, a headless chicken like I was before I found astrology. Astrology has really helped me put things into perspective. And so for me, yeah, that's what I'm proclaiming, that astrology is a tool. For a lot of times I like, what's the word? I take advantage of it in the sense that I don't go to look at the astrology to understand what's going on. But then when I do go, I'm like, what the heck? Why did it take me so long to come look at what's going on? Because this puts everything in perspective and I know how to go about my days. And so, yeah, my proclamation is that if I were to sum it up, is that I am going to live within the rhythms of nature and guide others to do the same. Thank you.
So beautiful.
So
Yeah, I hope you got a lot of practical tips. We just threw out a lot of, astro jargons, but hopefully it was digestible enough for you to be guided with like what's happening in the sky and how you can take advantage of this portal. If like we definitely we're encouraging you to share what are you releasing. We're sharing this on YouTube, we're sharing this on Instagram. Please hit us up in the comments, anything that you're also releasing, anything that you're going through, any help or any questions that you have with your chart, or just dialogue. If there's anything that's coming up for you that you just want to share in community, we're here for you. This is why we're doing what we're doing. It's to just really open up these massive portals to consciousness. And I know that word gets thrown off a lot these days, but really just being conscious that we are more than who they told us to be, and that we are love. I keep saying that. I hope that's making sense.
It's important.
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you for joining us. That was fun as always, my fairy loves. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Catch us on the 11th of June. That's another eclipse. That's an annular solar eclipse. We'll definitely explain more why it's called an annular solar eclipse, and what's happening in the sky and how you can work with energies for the rest of June, because we're officially in Gemini season. We're not in Taurus anymore, but we're still in a Taurus lunation. So this full moon is sort of a culmination of what was seeded during the Taurus new moon on the 11th of May. So yeah.
Christina, you mentioned that your mom was telling you to be still when it's still eclipse is happening. I think I would say be still and just observe for the yourself and your surroundings for the next 2 weeks, because if you don't have clarity of what you're releasing yet on the day itself, until like the next new moon, then just be gentle with yourself, and just be aware, like, okay, okay, and not too much like resisting. So yeah, this is probably in connection to not to move so much.
Yeah, and I want to say also that probably not just till the next new moon, till after Mercury is retrograde. So post Mercury retrograde, come back and check in, because a lot of times while we're in the retrograde, which will begin the end of this week, we're not really able to see. We're seeing a little bit blurry kind of. And so cut yourself some slack. Witness, be there, allow the things that need to come up, allow yourself to yell, cry, run, fly away, whatever you need. And then at the end of it, once Mercury is done retrograding, just have a look back. How did it look? How did it feel? And with Saturn retrograde, the call, like we've already gone through this. We've already gone through this Saturn area, but it's moving backward, being like, hey, but did you do the work? But did you do the work? And Jana says that Saturn is like a dad that kicks you in the ass and tells you where to go if you're not doing the work. And so this is what's already happening. Our asses are already being kicked. So the most we can do, or even the least that we can do, is self-compassion. And like Thea said, again, come back to love. And it sounds so simple. Like that was my goal forever, come back to love. And it sounds so simple, but when we're amidst all our fear and confusion, we're so lost. And then just listen and hear Thea's voice come into your head and be like, how can I come back to love? And you're all set. With that, I think we're good to wrap up. We shared what we could. We showed up as we are. We're grateful for everyone that comes to show up with us, that allows us to show up, that supports us through this. We're here to support you as well. It's the least we can do. We're so happy. I know I'm speaking for myself when I say I'm so happy that we've built this community, that we have each other, that we just have people that have like similar mindsets and similar heartscapes. And yeah, so thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Till next time. Bye.